So we've looked at media, we've looked at faith and how we have to look at media through the lens of our Christian faith. And lastly, we're going to look at the idea of culture. How are we engaging the culture? I remember being a teenager, I'm in a youth group night. Some of you might be doing this now, and in came a speaker, and he talked about putting everything you do in life through Philippians 4:8. And Philippians 4:8, summing it all up, friends, I'd say you do your best by filling your minds and meditating on things that are, I understood up to that point. And then he says, true. And he said, true music. And I'm like, what is true music? And he's like, noble video games. And I remember it saying out Robin Hood. Robin Hood's the only word I would ever hear the word noble. And then he said, reputable TV. And I'm like, you've lost me. Because the words you're using aren't connecting with anything that I do in my life. And so I kind of changed it a little bit. And here's what I say. What is the worldview of the song, the band, the game, whatever else? And then, what does the Bible say about those things? Now, we as Christians do not accept anything blindly, nor do we reject anything blindly, right? It's a strategic, intentional pursuit of life. That's kind of our Christian faith. So we either now have to say, yes, we accept, no, we reject. Now, there's a middle one, which is modify. I don't often see this, but there are times that might come into play. Now, because the world around us comes from a different worldview, we must put everything through that kind of sieve, if you want to call it, or through that lens of a biblical worldview. Now, this is how we engage things in our own life, but how do we effectively engage the culture for Christians? Because the Bible uses these analogies of salt and light. Now, salt is used throughout the Bible. There's many kind of things it could mean. It could mean currency, right? That's kind of part of Scripture. There's salt mines outside of Jerusalem, but often it's used as this idea of salt into meat. Now, most of us don't understand that fully because we don't live in that time and era. But if you were in biblical times and you got meat, it was hot, it began to rot immediately. You didn't go to a grocery store, it's vacuum packed or frozen, you bring it home to your freezer. So in biblical times, you would put salt on it. You would rub the salt into it, and it would do two things. It would preserve it, and it would season it. The idea being you are to preserve and season the world around you. And then there's the idea of light. It's light in darkness. Right? The idea in Matthew, you're a light of the world, a city set in a hill can't be hidden. I really like that analogy of light. And I once said to groups, you could have three types of light. You could have a match with a little light. If I turned off every light in this place and it was nighttime, a little match. You could have a little cheap flashlight or have you ever seen those Costco 2 million candle watt, literally you're outside, they shoot into the sky. So I would say we can be different kinds of light as well. But the analogies are all about breaking out of the Christian world and breaking into the world around us. Now, the problem is sometimes is that we don't leave our Christian kind of world. I do a morning devotional with a guy named Sky. I don't do it with him. I get it sent to me each day, Sky Jathani. And he had this on Twitter one day. He called us the fear evangelicals. And it was this idea of how we either flee or we fight. Now, fight or flight is fight, flight, or freeze is a mental health thing with panic attacks. But this is the analogy of how we engage the world. We either fight the world or we flee from the world. Now, so much fear in this. There's no conversation, no discourse, no listening or anything else. Now, there's an author named Carrie Oberbrunner who had a book called The Journey Towards Relevance. And he says there's kind of three different ways that we interact with the world. We're either separatists, and this is kind of separatists. We flee and we fight the world. Or we're conformists, where we become the world as Christians. There's no difference between us. But he challenges us to be transformists. Big words, but that we go into the world to transform the world. But often, I don't see that. Now, this slide brings up a bit of laughter. Some people get angry and they think I'm making fun of quote-unquote Christian companies. I just want us to critique something. If we're just making Christian alternatives of regular things, does it work? Does it not? There's Facebook, then there became Faithbook. Google it. It's the same blue with white lettering. How about Netflix and PureFlix? PureFlix came out with the movie based on the book The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. Fantastic movie, and it's on Netflix. But at a certain point with people, there's movies I don't know on PureFlix, and then there's movies I know on Netflix. There has to be a discernment, not one is good, one is bad. There's YouTube, and then there's GodTube. I was at home many years ago. I got an email. It was a daily email from GodTube, and it gave me 3 different videos. The first was about cats. cats. I have an English bulldog at home. I don't like cats. Again, what that has to do with God on GodTube, I don't know. The second was really moving stories of soldiers coming home, moving stories, but not really faith. And the third was really good musicians on America's Got Talent. This was GodTube. Do you know what YouTube sends me every day? Best faith-based content in the world. Because if you're signed in, and I would encourage you all to be signed in, their algorithm knows what you're doing. And if I'm researching like this talk, media or faith or spiritual disciplines, it will start every day just giving you the best content around. Twitter, there was a version called Christian Chirp. Now it went bankrupt a few years ago. I'm never going to stop talking about it. It was literally a bird with a halo on top of it. The point is, we're taking a version of something and we're pulling Jesus out of somewhere where the world is and making him like, I don't know non-Christians who would go to GodTube or go to Christian Chirp. Pinterest, love it. God interest. Like Vine died. God Vine is still live and online. We make Christian t-shirts. When I go to festivals in the summer, like Subway, it's literally the Subway restaurant and it's now his way. Enjoy Coca-Cola becomes Enjoy Jesus Christ. You know what that is? It's called theft. It's literal theft. The only reason that we're not being sued is, I guess, because we're faith-based people. I don't know. There is Elf on a Shelf, and then we made a version Shepherd on a Search. Now, the best version ever is the Jewish version, Mensch on a Bench, which I think is one of the funniest things I've heard in a long time. But again, it's the idea of alternatives. Monopoly becomes Bibleopoly. By the way, I like different versions of Monopoly. I have no problem with that. Settlers of Catan, anyone play the best game ever? Ever played Settlers of Canaan? It's the same game, but a Christian alternative. I am not saying everything Christian is bad. My kids attend a Christian camp. It's okay, but here's my challenge for you watching this today. Where in the church world are the artists? Where are the designers? Where are the creators? Where are the thinkers? Where are the builders? Where are the musicians? Stop copying culture and go and make and engage culture. I think often many of these things we've just talked about are de-evangelism tools. Instead of engaging the culture, we are engaging ourselves as other Christians. John Stott said in a very old school quote, I'm going to translate it as I read it to you. He says this, Christian salt, you and me, we have no business to remain, I just say on the shelf. He says snugly and elegant ecclesiastical salt cellars. He says it better than me. But he says, one can hardly blame unsalted meat, the world around us, for going bad. It can't do anything else. The real question to ask is, where is the salt? And I would say, where are you? He's comparing the world to rotting meat, and he says, you are the salt. It is your responsibility. So how are you salting the world? And so I would say to you, as Christians, as students, how are you engaged in the world? I often say it this way, who are you? Are you a musician? Because we need musicians who will go and engage the world. I love the band For King and Country, just to name one. I saw them on like Good Morning America once, and I've seen them all over, mainstream and not. I hear them playing when I'm in Costco and different things. And I love how they're singing to the mainstream culture, but they also can engage us as faith-based people. We need amazing praise and worship leaders in our churches and our conferences. But I love musicians who say, I'm a musician, but I only want to sing to the mainstream culture. I only want to play in bars and clubs. I made a vow decades ago that I would go to any bar and club in Toronto when an artist who's a Christian, language matters, an artist who's a Christian, I don't say Christian artist. I was a teacher who's a Christian, not a Christian teacher. When I would hear that an artist who's a Christian was coming into Toronto to play, and it's a mainstream venue, I would write them and say, coming to pray for you guys tonight. One guy wrote me back and he said this, thanks for joining the war tonight. There's many of you in the audience. And I was just, it's one of those moments like you're a little humbled and I got a little teary and it's like, who else is going into a bar and a club to sing to high and drunk or maybe just regular people who are there and saying, here are some good things in the world. But you're like, Brett, I'm not a musician. And I'd say, okay, who are you? Are you an athlete? Give me more Mike Fishers, and I know he's retired, on the ice. Give me more Steph Currys on the basketball court. We need men and women in every sport in the world, every level, who will go and engage and live their faith out on all those different places. And you're like, but I'm not an athlete. Great, who are you? Like, are you great at writing? If you are a great writer, please do well in high school. I even challenge you to go get a tutor for writing. There's an author named Marcus Buckingham, and he had in a book, I forget what it was called, but he talks about strengths. And he says, if there's a ladder with 10 rungs on it, he says, you can go up 2 rungs in your whole life. I'm a 3 at language. I've written 5 books, but I'm a 3. If I work my whole life, I become a 5. What he says to you is this: if you're an 8 at language, go get a tutor for language. Meaning, if you have a C in math and an A in language, get a tutor for language. Talk about a switch in life. We're a culture that works towards mediocrity as opposed to being the best that you can be. That's the US Army slogan, I think, but being the best that you can be in whatever you're doing. If you're good at language, go get a journalism degree at university, and then go write books, go write movies, go write television scripts, go be involved in that. But you might say, but Brett, that's not me. And I would say again, well, who are you? Are you a nurse? My wife is. Are you a teacher? I was. I think I still am. Are you going to work in a factory? You're going to go work like on the east or west coast where they're fishing? For us as Canadians, you're going to work in the tar sands of Alberta. There's no such thing as sacred and secular. If you know Jesus, you are in sacred work. If I came from me where I am now and drove to you wherever you are, I would pass thousands of schools, thousands of businesses, malls and restaurants. We need Christians in all of them where you go and engage the world around you. Frederick Buechner once said, your calling is found where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. I always just say, what are your natural talents and gifts, natural talents and abilities woven together with your spiritual gifts that make you you? Again, with culture. And I love this idea of media and faith and culture because I think we need to look at media. We need to look at it from a Christian lens and a worldview, but we must look at engaging the culture. And I leave you with the question for culture very simply of who are you?